Welcome to Younger Older. I'm Dave Wager, your host here in the studios at Birch Ranch on the campus of the Nicolet Bible Institute. And once again, I'm joined by Jeremy Lundgren. He's the president of Nicolet Bible Institute. He wrote a book, The Pursuit of Safety, which I recommend you get and read and start thinking through some of that. I love the challenges of being able to look at something that seems apparent, but then ask questions about it and see if it's really apparent or not. I know that sounds dumb in one way, but it's like, okay, how much do you trust your money? Should you be responsible with money? And how much do you trust God? And right. What does responsibility with money look? I think those are good questions. Likewise with safety. Should we try and be trusting so much in our processes of keeping us safe, or do we trust in God to keep us safe? And what does that relationship actually look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you think about something like money. I was actually just meeting with some of our interns today, and we were talking about if on a childlike level, if you talk about God being good, what does it mean that God's good? And we quickly come to this idea that, well, God's just going to give me everything that I want. And wouldn't that be great? God would be good if he did those things for us. But we live in a world where God does very little outside of like the world that he created. And here's what I mean by that. God is good to us. He gives us so many good things, but there are means by which it happens. So, right, Adam and Eve in the garden, he provides for them fruit, all the things that they need, but he calls them to work and to tend that garden. And so in our lives, anyways, that's just kind of an opening thought I have.
So if they didn't work and tend the garden, would they have anything to eat?
Well, it's a hypothetical question.
Okay.
Right, before sin, you could imagine, well, maybe they just didn't do anything, and maybe the garden falls into disrepair, but maybe not. But without sin, you'd think they would just happily obey God. But it's after sin where God says, right, by the sweat of your brow you will eat. And so think about something like money. We think about something like our own safety, and do I trust in money, or do I trust in God? Maybe we were talking about this on a previous episode. You trust God, and then you trust that in the normal means of his world, you work to acquire things, and those are the means by which you get the other things that you need. And so you work a job, and that's the money that God provides for you, and you take that money, you go to the store, and you buy the food that you need to eat. And all along the way, you thank God for providing the job, you thank God for providing the money, and then before you eat the food, what do? You bow your head and you say, thank you, God, for providing this food for us, even though you could say, I'm the one that worked, I'm the one who went and bought it at the store, I'm the one who cooked it. But we know that's not how the world works, and so we say, no, thank you, God, you're the one that provided this for us.
Right. When I was in Africa once, and I was just amazed at the food that they were eating compared to the food that I was eating here at home. And it was a remote part. And I remember when I got back, I started to think about all the ramifications of the food that I was eating and how easy it was for me to eat that food.
Okay.
And I wasn't thankful for it. I expected it. For example, a box of cereal.
Yeah. And
I was thinking, so I stopped before I ate breakfast when I got back, and I started to list everything that it would take for that box of cereal to be on my counter. And I was amazed. I mean, someone had to design the little logos in the box. Someone had to make the box. There was wax paper on the inside. Some farmer had to grow the grain. Somebody had to take that grain and do something to it and make it flaky. Whatever. And
somebody wrote the jokes that were on the
back of the
box as well.
So I am sitting there listing all these things and saying, God, I don't think I've ever thanked you for a box of cereal. I mean, honestly, been overly thankful. I think I've gone through the motions of thanking God, but until I went to a place where there was nothing, I don't think I was thankful like I should be. And so I think that's just, again, it opens a perspective in a way where, should I be thankful for the food I'm eating? Yeah, I don't even realize in a rich country like the United States of America how I grew up, where when you talk about need, it's mostly, for me, it was you didn't have seconds.
Right.
It wasn't that I had a need for a meal. And so now I'm trying to get my brain, as I get older, into the right perspective and understand, boy, I have so much to be grateful for. health included, safety included. I mean, those kinds of things.
And we live in a world where oftentimes the things we enjoy are disconnected from the work that we do. So obviously, if you're a farmer, I can't grow anything, but my wife, we have a vegetable garden, and it's exciting to go out there and pick the squash or the tomatoes, the cucumbers, whatever it might be, even to go, and get the eggs that our hens are laying. And I think I didn't have anything to do with that, but it's exciting to open up the hatch of the chicken coop and see the eggs and collect them. And so that's a little bit. And even with the food, God makes, or Scripture makes the point that you scatter the seed, but it's God that causes the growth. And so, I didn't grow the cucumber, but it's exciting to pick it because you're at least a little bit more directly connected with the effort that you're putting into the thing and the stuff that you're getting. So going to the grocery store and buying a box of cereal with your credit card for a job that you worked somewhere else, it's a little bit more disconnected. It doesn't need to be, and it shouldn't be. And I think that thought exercise that you had was a great one where we could look at it.
Yeah, it was disturbing to me, actually. Because it was like, you know how many things that I enjoy that I've never really thanked God for?
Right.
I just kind of think that I deserve them, or I put myself in a position where I did something for this. I worked for it. To really be thankful, and I had to sit there that morning and just confess that to God and say, you know what, I think I've missed something here along the way. Because it's not that I haven't gone through the motions of thanking you for the food. I've certainly done that every meal. I know how to bow my head. I know how to say the prayer. But to be absolutely thankful. There was another time when a little girl was here, and she was from, I think, the jungles of Venezuela, Colombia, somewhere.
Okay.
At that point, just a little girl, 5 years, 6 years old. I forgot. She was with her parents, and they'd come over here, and I forget even how they got here. I think it was New Tribes or something. Regardless. And I was sitting eating with the family, and that little girl wouldn't eat, and she was just staring. She was just staring the whole time. And finally I asked the dad, I said, what's the deal? She's staring at the milk there. He goes, she's never seen that much milk anywhere in the world.
Wow.
It's 1 gallon. And I thought, it's on every table. There's gallons everywhere around here of milk.
Right.
In fact, if you watch that table over there, that kid's going to throw it on him in a minute. You know what I mean? It's like kids don't even respect the fact that they have milk. So there are these moments, there are just these moments in life where I think God captures my attention on some things that need attention in that sense, where it's like, I don't know that I ever was amazed by the fact that I could grab a gallon of milk and pour a cup.
Well, where my mind goes with that is there are just things in daily life that we take for granted. And on the one hand, we really should be thankful for the stability, the predictability of the ways that God provides for us. And if you had a life where every day you're rediscovering how to make things happen, there's a lot of energy that goes into that. And so God is faithful to us, and we like it. We like that the sun rises every morning, but we stop thanking God for the sun rising every morning. And so it's just interesting the way that our hearts work, where we want predictability from God, and then when He gives it to us, we so quickly take it for granted. And then when He works in miraculous ways, in ways that kind of break the pattern, the monotony of normal life, those things are exciting, but all the tension building, leading up to that is really stressful for us. And so I think we go back and forth between enjoying God surprising us or acting in unexpected ways, and then also wanting that predictability. And then when God does kind of ease, the children of Israel, they're out in the wilderness and they need food. And so for 40 years, the first time the manna showed up, it's this miraculous thing, and then it just becomes part of their daily life, a pattern, and they're taking it for granted. And then they start grumbling about it, and they say, we have to keep eating this stuff. Yeah. We want something different to eat, and how often we can act the same way. I was also thinking kind of along the lines of safety. We live our daily lives. We drive our cars. We operate machinery. We go to work. We do things like that. And I was trying to think of real quick off the top of my head, an example in my life. Maybe you can think of an example of like a close call where maybe just driving and you almost have a bad accident, something that just wakes you up and you realize, oh, God protected me in that situation. And I take it for granted, just all the normal, uneventful car trips that I make, but every once in a while something stands out and we realize, things could have gone bad, and I'm thankful to God.
I remember a car instance, but it was here, and we were working on a car.
Okay.
And really, I didn't think much about it. There was a truck, and our mechanic was trying to shove this transmission back into the truck, and those are heavy.
Right.
The truck transmissions, automatic, trying to push it in. And he said, "Hey, can you come down and help me?" Sure. So I lay under there, and I'm pushing with and all of a sudden that thing let loose, actually. And it was crashing toward my temple of my head. I forget how heavy these things are, but it would have killed me.
Right.
The very lip on the very end of it caught, and it stopped about that far, about an inch from my forehead.
Yeah.
It stopped.
Oh, man.
The mechanic was pale, and he looked at me and goes, "You were close to death. I mean, that thing would have crushed your skull." And I rolled on and he goes, "Really?" I mean, I never did mechanic stuff before. I don't know. You told me to get down there and push this.
Mm-hmm.
Safety again. Retrospect, I've never pushed another one like that. I've learned my lesson. That's not what you do. But I often look at, again, I'll look at that and wonder, I wonder if God just caught that for me to say, your time's not done yet and you're ignorant. You shouldn't be doing this.
But I'm going to have mercy.
But I'm going to have mercy on you this time.
Yep.
And I want you to learn not to do that in the future. So probably it's a good idea to get yourself a transmission jack.
Right.
And do it the right way. And again, I think that has to do with you can't go about saying what happened once, so it'll always catch like that. And God, right. You'll take care of me, and I'm a fatalist,
right?
Kind of thing. There is this relationship between being responsible, but never losing the fact that God is in charge of the universe. He's the one you trust.
Right.
As I was thinking about this cereal thing that I talked about, I want to encourage, if you're a parent, you have children, or younger brother or sister, sit down at a table sometime and just go through what it took to get that meal there. Really. Everybody that touched it before you did. How did it happen? And see the huge process in the United States of America that it takes to get a banana to your table. And now ask the kids to be thankful, because it's got so many fingers at that point as far as how it happened in the first place.
Yep, there are other people working, other people making decisions, other people involved in that process.
Yeah, it just opens our eyes to things, I think, where, okay, I need to be somebody who acknowledges the fact that God has provided for me in this world, both food, safety-wise. When you look back on those kind of things, I don't know. I have often wondered, because I used to go speak a lot different places, so I drove a lot. And I thought, how easy it would be for somebody to lose control and get a head-on collision. Now, I wore a seatbelt, I followed the laws, I did what I should do.
Right.
But when I started thinking how easy it would be for some mechanical failure to happen, and something happened to me, I started thanking God for his protection, even though I had the seatbelt on and I was doing all the rules. I started to see how much stuff outside what I controlled could actually have a bearing on me. And that's kind of in this total safety realm. I mean, I still did what I should, but...
Yeah, it is, and it shows, that there are, like you said, there are limitations to what you can control. And one of the things we often do is, when there are things outside of our control, and in some instances when it's other people driving cars, it's under the control of someone else, and we want those other people to be responsible, and so that's why so often we get angry when people aren't driving the way that we think they should. Sometimes it's because we're in a hurry and we want them to get out of the way, but other times it's because they've done something foolish, negligent. We realize how much damage or harm that can cause, and so there's anger that might get in the way. But then there are other things that are just natural things, or things that from our perspective just seem random. You talked about mechanical failure, and so who could predict I used to have an old Jeep. I was driving home with my friend. I was probably like 18, 19 years old, and the brake caliper, or not the brake caliper, the master cylinder went out on that thing. And who could have? I mean, it was an old Jeep. You could have predicted that anything was going to break on that thing any given day. But who would have known that? And so I had to drive home without brakes, and thankfully I didn't hit much traffic, and we were okay. There's really only one instance where I saw another car coming and was wondering how to navigate that situation. So there are things that are outside of our control, and when we look at safety, there's God gives us responsibility to act in meaningful ways, exercising control over the things that He's given us to exercise control over. And I don't think in an obsessive way, I don't think in a paranoid or way that is full of worry, but just to do the things that God has called us to do, to talking about food, to you plant the seed, you harvest the grain, but there might be a drought, there might be a blight, there might be a famine, there might be these different things. And so I think that's where safety gets really hard for us, is we often think about it formulaically of, if I do these things, right, if I plant the seed and harvest the grain, my barns will be full for wintertime. Because look at the ant in Proverbs chapter 6, and a lot of the time God created a world where there's order to it, and a lot of time you do that, but then when you read the story of Israel, sometimes there are famines, sometimes there's war, sometimes there's these things that happen that are outside of our control. And so I think the challenge to us is to trust God in the ordinary, predictable patterns of life in this world that God created. But then God has the power and the right to disrupt the normal patterns of weather, the normal patterns of life, of politics, of family, those sorts of things, and to trust Him and to be able to respond when those things happen.
And I think at times He does that to make sure that we understand that it's He alone that protects us. Right. Even though we're to be responsible in the protection. Yep. But it's so easy to get one step off. Again, we're talking about a book, The Pursuit of Safety, a Theology of Danger, Risk, and Security, that Jeremy wrote. I was reading in the second chapter, which is entitled The Form and Status of Safety Today. And one of the sentences that grabbed me, I'm going to read this to you, because you wrote it, so you know what it says, but I'll read it to you anyway. It says, "How else would safety be conceived but as a human control of the physical world?" And I stopped there. I marked that sentence because as I read it, I thought, yeah, you know what? I keep wanting to control my own destiny. I want to control my own world. I want to look back and say, Dave Wager did a great job in this world and deserves safety. And I keep maximizing my role. Right. And minimizing God's role. And then if I start thinking about it, I think, oh, I should maximize God's role. But then I minimize my role. So now I got this teeter-totter thing going on in my head. It's like, welcome to my world. Yeah, if I maximize God, it's teeter-totter thinking. I maximize God, now I'm not responsible anymore. I maximize me, now I'm forgetting God and His role. So how do I get the balance where we're right where we belong on this thing? Or do we never get there because we're constantly learning and changing and developing? Because that's always it could be money, it could be food, but we're talking safety here, so it could be safety. Right.
Yeah, and I go back to the doctrine of creation, of God creating this world, putting Adam and Eve in it, where other types of creatures, so the earth, the planets, the stars, the little bugs, the animals, the wind, all those sorts of things, they have an existence outside of us, right? God created them for His glory, for His pleasure, and so the plants growing and producing fruit, the sun rising, all those sorts of things, the rain coming, those are things that happen according to the good pleasure of God. And then He puts mankind in the middle of that and calls us to be His stewards over creation, to tend it and care for it. And you read a commentary on the book of Genesis, and there's lots of discussions on what that means, how much control or how much power God gave man with that command to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, those sorts of things. And in the modern world, we think about that, and so that's what I'm talking about when I say how else would safety be conceived, but as human control of the physical world. I'm talking about how the modern humanity conceives of safety, and it is we have this power, and so you'll see it both on the worldly side, and then sometimes the church is agreeing with the world that God's given us some sort of total control or absolute control over the rest of creation, that it's ours to just do with whatever we're able to do. I talk a lot about technology as well, and then there's other good resources out there about technology where we don't really have any internal limits as a society on what to do with technology. It's just, if we can figure out how to make it happen, then let's make it happen. Right. And we think about that with technology as well, of how much can we control the world around us. And so if we can make it happen. The other thing that's worth highlighting, so you were talking about where that statement kind of raises questions of how much control do we really have. The other issue there is control over the physical world, where we neglect that this world isn't just physical. We kind of forget about the other realm. We forget that there's a spiritual aspect to this world. So as far as ourselves, that we have a soul, and so the things that we do don't just affect our bodies, but they affect our hearts, they affect our souls. So when you're talking about whether or not we trust God, the way that we live our lives, kind of the habits, the things that we look to for comfort, for security, it's not just training our bodies to look for certain or look for safety from certain sources, but it's also on a spiritual level training our hearts, or just the simple fact that we neglect there's Satan, right, an enemy prowling around seeking whom he may devour, and the various ways that he might do that. And so that's a topic that in various ways I try to explore in the book, is how does our morality, whether what we're doing is good or evil in the sight of God, is going to lead us even towards physical pain and suffering, towards physical,
right.
I don't know about you, but I found that in my life I'm more prone to accidents when I'm a little more self-centered, a little more cocky, a little more prideful. And you could say, well, technically accidents is where you lose focus, or you forget something, or something breaks that you weren't expecting to. And I'm like, yeah, I suppose you could say that, but I also know my heart. I know that when I'm thinking about other things instead of being focused on the thing I'm doing, or whatever it might be, when my heart's in the wrong place, I for whatever reason, I stumble and fall more frequently.
Yeah, I think when I go out and do something where I know I should take more time and figure out how to do it.
Right.
I hear my wife's, she'll say something like, "Are you sure you don't need to, have somebody hold that ladder or
no,
whatever?"
It's fine. I got it.
Yeah, it's like, I'll be fine. And then I'll hear this under the breath, maybe not under the breath, famous last words.
Right.
I mean, it's like, okay, how many times has this not gone well when you think she has told me, and it's true, and I don't know if everyone's like this, she said, you are so confident in doing something that you shouldn't be doing. You have this total confidence in, it'll work out, when it may not. And she's, half the time it doesn't. I've come home from out, I don't need chaps for chainsawing. I come home with bloody legs.
Right.
It's like, well, what happened? Well, it was a freak. Yeah, if you look at my old chaps now, they have at least 2 places where it could have really been bad that the chaps saved me. So I wear chaps all the time now when I do it.
Yep.
Well, I've learned, but before I just thought I could handle this. I am not going to make a mistake. I think sometimes I'm elevating myself to God level. I'm not going to make a mistake. Why? Because I'm that good. No, you're not.
Yeah, and to push that in a little bit of a different direction. So there is, we're at risk. We're at greater risk when we're overconfident. And I think our world, in our world, we have this idea of making certain things foolproof. So let's make a chainsaw that's foolproof. Well, a chainsaw is just an inherently dangerous thing, chainsawing.
Yes,
And so you don't want a fool. You really don't want a fool operating a chainsaw. And so that's one of the dangers in our world is to solve that problem of, there's pride on the one hand, there's foolishness on the other hand. And really, when you look at Scripture and how to interact with the things in this world that can be dangerous in a good way, we kind of get into this category of skill and wisdom. And so I would, on the one hand, I would rather have a humble, skillful, experienced, and knowledgeable chainsaw operator without chaps than a fool with chaps.
Right.
I mean, ideally it would be with the chaps
Right.
and the skill.
I hear you.
But too often this is kind of an over-reliance on technology where we say, let's devise a gadget to protect your fingers, protect your legs, protect this and that, instead of taking the time to learn the thing that
Right.
you're trying to do. And I think that'd go a long way towards safety as if we would less pressure on getting as much done as quickly as possible, and a little more time spent on developing skills and wisdom.
Yep. I think God, from the beginning, wants us to learn what responsibility is all about. It's part of love. I think He gives us choices.
Yep.
And in order to really be a loving God, those choices have to have real consequences to them. And if He takes those away completely, we're robotic and it doesn't work. I mean, I like to blame God for anything that doesn't work.
Right.
I like to blame Him for it. But, I need to understand what it is to accept responsibility. I'm responsible to seek God with all my heart, soul, and mind. When I don't, there's going to be a consequence. I'm also responsible to look at the task I'm involved in and do it as safe as I can. And if I refuse responsibility in any way, shape, or form, there's going to be a consequence to it. And I need to understand that. So I think part of it is, it's like God made me to be a responsible human being. I need to take that seriously and be responsible.
Yeah, as I've heard someone say, if you bang your head against a wall, you're going to get a headache.
You are.
And God created that way in His mercy and in His goodness for us as humans. Just the ways that we learn, God is like, okay, you want to feel what the consequences of your action are like. Just go do things in this world, and over again, God relentlessly just allows us to bang our heads against walls and get headaches and do it again, and then learn through that. And that's the difference between the fool and the person who's prudent. Is the fool keeps banging his head against the wall, but if you're prudent, if you're wise, you learn from that. You learn to adapt to your behavior. I think it's pride. It's just callousness to try and do otherwise.
I think we need to be responsible, loving God, loving each other, doing what's right. The book is called The Pursuit of Safety, Theology of Danger, Risk, and Security. Can they get it on Amazon?
You can get it on Amazon. Yeah, that's a good place to find it.
All right, so you can go get your own copy of it. Let it stimulate your thought process. Thank you for joining us today in Young or Older. I'm Dave Wager here in the studios at Silver Birch Ranch. Goodbye for now.